I want you to think back in high school when you were maybe around middle school, late grades, kind of still that early age, right? And you felt sad about something, right? You felt so sad one day, maybe to the point where you went home and you were crying in the shower or crying in your bed or something like that. And it was just a sadness that now looking back on it seems like so little, so nothing because you can't even remember what made you cry or made you so sad at the time. Now that you have this perspective in the future, but back then you just felt like the world was crumbling around you and you were just depressed about yourself, maybe thinking thoughts of like, what's wrong with me? Why would they say that or something like that? Or like just anything that would, typical sad thoughts would lead you to cry and stuff, like deep moments of utter sadness as a teenager. And, teenagers were these hormonal beings, these creatures of just like this mess of hormones, right? So sometimes, like for girls or guys, it's just like sometimes you just feel this need to cry out of nowhere. But, we would feel sad over the stupidest things, whether it's social pressures, whether it's, how we see ourselves compared to others and all that. My point being is that in those moments of sadness, there's something that teenagers, a phrase that we often say, even as adults, especially when we're caught in moments of embarrassment. It's the phrase, oh, kill me now. I can't believe I just did that. Or, oh my God, I want to kill myself. It's so embarrassing, right? But even in those moments of like actual sadness, so let's say when you're alone, maybe you're in the corner of your shower crying, you're feeling the warm water hit your head as you're putting your head against your knees, crouched up in a position where you just feel warm and you don't want to like leave the shower. And it's just comforting and you just don't know how to deal with your emotions, but how you're feeling physically with the water hitting you is just so nice. And that's all you need is just a little bit of warmth in your life, right? In the moment. And so in that moment, you might be thinking suicidal thoughts for all because you might be thinking it, but chances are most of us go down this route and think thoughts like, oh, geez, I hate how I am at school or at work or whatever. And I just want to kill myself. I hate this. And maybe even there's other pressures in your life, like your family or your friends and stuff like that. Maybe there's other things at home that you come home to and just adds on to that sadness, right? So the point is that you're telling yourself these thoughts of like, oh, I just want to kill myself. I hate myself. I just want it all to end. And it's the wrong thing to say because technically what we really mean is that we want the pain to end. We don't want our lives to end. We don't want us to never get another chance at doing something again. We don't actually want to end our lives most of the time in these moments for the typical sense of sadness most people get. I'm not talking about clinical depression or all that. I have no idea about that. But as someone who's obviously experienced sadness, as most people do in their lives, everyone does. It's just, we just want an escape. We want whatever made us sad or the feeling of sadness to end because the pain is so unbearable on the inside. And especially as a teenager, you don't know how to relieve that. And, the brain doesn't really fully develop till you're around the age of like 24. So like all the time, so many moments in my life. Right now, I'm in the age of 26. I look back at when I was life as a teenager and how I saw the world, how I saw my problems, and I'm like, oh my God, I was just mentally incapable of dealing with the themes and struggles that were impacting me either directly or indirectly in my life. And it's just no wonder I just didn't know what to do with it or how to deal with it and all that crap. Anyways, point being is that in those moments where we're just not understanding, the closest phrase we get to is, oh, I want to kill myself. I want life to end. I blah, 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 blah. And it's just, you just want an escape from it, really. And it's just like the idea of the escape, it seems to be like our thoughts kind of go towards that because it's kind of comforting in a way, even though these thoughts are negative and they're obviously things you don't want to have that people encourage you like, oh, don't, obviously we're trying to avoid suicide with many people, but like in reality, most of the times as a teenager, you're not actually looking for suicide. You're just looking for someone to hold your shoulder and say it's going to be okay and hug you or love you and all that stuff. Kind of to the analogy of the warm shower I mentioned earlier. It's just literally that feeling of someone giving you warmth, someone being there for you. In this case, literally just warm water on your skin. But so yeah. So in those moments of sadness, we seek just the comfort and escape. And so how can death bring us something so feared and unknown and blah, 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 blah. No matter how you see death, God bless you if you're a goth and your whole life is centered around death and you just live in a coffin, right? When you sleep, that type of goth lifestyle. But we're derailing here. Point being is that death can be comforting in the sense that death is actually a thought of escape, you know, from the struggles of the world we face. And we don't even realize we're using that analogy as teenagers already, right? We don't really think about it. I mean, we kind of know that already, but we kind of don't see that in that line or train of thought. And today I'd like to talk about how that line has led me to make this playlist on Spotify, this playlist I call Sleep Journeys. And this is how I kind of categorize these things, because this one album kind of sparked and really solidified this theme for me, but there's also other things that surround it for me. So there is this band called Oak Pantheon, and they're this small time metal band, and you know, all they're trying to do is create these ambient, memorable experiences through their metal music. Now, if you go to their page, you'll find that their music, you know, their main albums are basically just like heavy metal, screaming, cool guitar, blah, blah, blah. But they made this one EP, this one mini album called Soul, okay? The album is called Soul. And on it are 6 tracks, just 6 tracks. And the first song is actually called Soul. And the whole idea of the album is that it's almost about this world, well, our world, that just gets destroyed by the gods. The god of soul, which is another word in this case they're using. I don't know if it's actually in like Greek terms or in actual ancient history. They use the word soul to mention, but the god of sun, the sun. And then the god of death, and it mentions the god of war. And there's these small themes throughout just these 6 songs. And one of the songs doesn't even have lyrics, but in these songs, they go off these main themes. And the first song, Soul, which is about the god of sun, the lyrics read, "The oceans will rise, and the forests will set aflame, and the coasts will erode, and we won't mind that much at first. And the droughts will starve us, and the heat will burn us, and the disease will thin us out, and one by one will disappear." Now, the lyrics clearly are talking about how the world is just going to slowly kill us. Maybe we caused it because of global warming, how we treat each other on the planet, and we're just causing our own demise, and the world will eat us and start anew again. And I think lyrics like, "and all at once will disappear," kind of adds to that, like, oh, I want to get out of here, the escapism we want to feel from sadness and all that, right? And even in one of these songs, actually, I'm just looking it up, that there's these few lyrics from the song "A Prayer of Light," and I can't play the music for you guys because of copyright reasons, but know that these songs, they start off slow. It's completely far removed from the typical stuff the band usually does with the heavy metal and the screaming and all that sort of stuff. It's more just ambient acoustic guitars, some bass drum sounds in the background, and it's this beautiful, like, ambient dark atmosphere around you. You know, just imagine the feeling of the warm shower, but you were in a dark void, but somehow you still felt that warmth, and the warmth slowly turned into a coldness you seeped into and did not feel like you were dipping your toes into cold water. It wasn't a shock to your system like that in any way. It was actually this just natural transition, it felt like. Anyways, I'm getting too deep into the sensory of it all, even though it's all personal. But anyways, as the music goes on, it's these acoustic dark ambient themes, like I'm saying. And in this next song, the third song on the album, "A Prayer for Light," lyrics read is, "I had a dream. The bright sun was extinguished, and the stars wandered in the eternal space. The icy earth swung blind and blackening in the moonless air. Morn came and went, and men forgot their passions and the dread. Of this, their desolation, all hearts were chilled into a selfish prayer for light. A fearful hope was all the world contained. Forests were set on fire, hour by hour. They fell and faded, and crackling trunks extinguished with a crash. And all was black, and war did glut himself again." And the lyrics kind of talk about how the god of war kind of took on everything that we caused ourselves and just kind of ate the world. But the end lyrics of this, where it says, "The world is void," and the singer goes like, "seasonless, herbless, treeless, manless, lifeless." And the idea that, for me personally at least, this album is what, and why I call this Sleep Journeys, is that a sleep journey is that it's something that, like, you kind of go to sleep, you put on some music, and you let your mind direct a movie for you, basically. You let your mind go, and as you're in that between of you're trying to sleep to actually falling asleep, those 15 or so minutes where your mind is slowly turning off, it's somewhat hallucinatory, somewhat like directing your own movie, but your subconscious is the director, where you're letting the music kind of fill your head in with imagery and stuff and things that make sense to you, because your subconscious only knows what it knows, right? So whatever appears in your mind in this movie your brain is making, it's kind of like this insane, like, insanely personal experience, I guess is what I'm saying. And that's why it's a sleep journey. It's your sleep. It's a journey that your mind is creating for yourself. A film it's making for you, an experience totally made out of what you're capable of, and whatever elements that show up in it mean specifically to you, right? And it somewhat is of a journey, because how some of these albums, such as Soul by Opantheon, this album, it tells a story on how the world starts, and it's decaying and it's destroyed. But the way the song is structured, and the fact that you're listening to it, is almost like you're a spectator to the world ending. You know, it's almost like as if you died, and the singer and the song is like someone telling you what happened right before you died, while you died, and after you died, and you're listening to the events. And I like to think of it as like this, as like, you know, you're astral projecting, almost like a lucid dream. You know, the idea that while you're asleep, you can come out of your body and just travel all over the world like some kind of being or whatever, and then go back. And when you wake up the next morning, you just go back to your body and blah, blah, blah. You could kind of see it as that way, whether you believe in that stuff or not. But to see it that way, as the song and the band are talking about, you know, the world is dying, the earth is turning to crumble, everything is turning gray and dark. It's that escape that you, and kind of that reset we all look for in life sometimes when life gets overwhelming, right? It's kind of like the world is over, you know, all those worries you had at school, at work, at home, with your wife, with your kids, with your friends, with your lover, with the fact you don't have a lover. It's just, it doesn't matter. It's all gone. It's all dead. Nothing exists anymore. You can just be this thing that used to exist, but now you're just somewhere, right? And so, yes, in one hand, the potential for anything is gone. You're dead. The world is dead. There is no society, or however, you know, the world worked for you when you were alive. But now you're just this thing that just kind of travels, right? There's no need, no pressure. You're just kind of there, and you exist in this thing. And now, again, it's all based off of the capacity which your subconscious can perceive and understand all these ideas and themes. So the idea that you're just this thing is just, it just feels right, because that's all you could really think about what makes sense to you, right? So you just rationalize that this is what exists and what it is, and there's no like scientific or actually and religious ideas or beliefs or proving this and that and what's true and what's not in the science world. That's not the point. The point is that your mind is letting make-believe happen, right? In a way that feels right to your soul, and you have the right to believe that. As we grow up, there's always that theme of like you lose your innocence as you get older, right? It's like, you know, it's like as if you were petting, you saw a snake, right? And you tried to pet it and you get bit by it. And it's like, that's the loss of innocence, you know? Getting bit by a snake is losing your innocence, because you realize the world is dangerous and you're a vulnerable being. And what's worse is if you trusted the snake, right? So that's kind of the break of innocence. And so as we get older, we lose that naivety, being naive, basically. And as you realize how much vulnerable you are, how dangerous the world really is, the more you kind of grow up, and you kind of lose that essence of imagination, of exploration of your mind, of just like being allowed to think of something or say something and not worry about someone else's opinion on it. And because when you're a little kid and you're growing up and you get through teenagers, that's where it really happens, where, oh, what happened to so-and-so when you're 6 years, like let's from the perspective like an aunt and uncle who saw you growing up, right? They'll probably say something like, oh, I remember when you were in diapers, or when you were like in 6 years old, you were like so outgoing and fun. And then all of a sudden you got quiet. Why'd you get quiet? You know, you got into high school and you got so quiet. You were such an expressive kid. And it's just, you realize that other people's opinions of you matter, right? Or you should filter yourself, or else you won't get anywhere in life, in a sense of like social pressures and like, you know, trying to get good in social groups. That's kind of the main priority for a kid at the time, right? But other than that, it's just the loss of innocence, the loss of allowing yourself to just be whatever and think whatever and just be free also, essentially. So again, the idea of a sleep journey is you go to bed, you have, I would recommend like a Bluetooth speaker with a nice bass around it, like a Bose speaker or something, or even noise canceling headphones if you're able to fall asleep to those on your head while sleeping, if it's comfortable. And you just leave a 15-minute timer, fall asleep, and the music and the bass of the music, because this is why this works kind of, is that it's ambient music, so the bass of it really creates a hum in your body. Your body is made of 70% water. I never forgot this fact. I think it was in like 6th grade or something. I went on a trip to go see a live play of Shakespeare somewhere with my 6th grade class, and they basically would give us a little mini improv session. And one of the things the teachers said at this random trip I went on was like, your body is 70% water. So noise and vibration really affect the body. And I found that to be such a fascinating take and like correlation of like art and you know, biology and like scientifically what humans are made of, like the physical resonance you have by just yelling at someone, right? How much power that actually has, and how much you could utilize that in forms of music or like in the play they were using for their Shakespeare play or whatever. So it's really important that like the low bass of like an ambient album or music such as Soul by Oak Pantheon and others I will get to, especially I think in the thumbnail I'm going to use the ODST picture. Now, why would I use ODST? Well, everyone remembers the music from that game. If you ever played a Halo game, ODST was that game that just had that music, right? Everyone still remembers the music. YouTubers all over praise it for its music and stuff like that. And if you ever played ODST, the start of the game starts with you being a rookie. You're a silent protagonist. You're just starting out. You're literally dropped into your first mission, and all hell breaks loose, and all the drop pods, as they're dropping down to Earth, they're all getting hit into each other, and they crash and like whatever. And then you're just alone in the city, lost all communication, and you're supposed to just traverse it, trying to piece together what happened to your crew. And again, just left alone on this planet that was used to be run by humans, now overrun by aliens. But that gets a little bit nerdy and sci-fi. But the point is that like you're alone in a dangerous place. It's dark. It's nighttime. There's rain at times, and you're just, again, this sense of alone, and you don't know what's going to happen next, and you're just trying to get through it. Whether you're strong or not, the game implies you're this rookie. You're the new guy. It's your first time. You're inexperienced. You got to grow by going forward into the unknown. So when the music of ODST plays, I kind of, when in that album too, the literal soundtrack is also another one I added to this playlist, is that the literal soundtrack just really puts you in that mood. So from the first song, and as it goes on, you could just imagine as the music rises, as it lowers, as it gets quiet, as it brings other instruments like drums or bongos or something like that, right? It's the songs and the music and the instruments and the feelings are all dictating to your subconscious how the story is playing out right now in this experience you are experiencing. So it is a very unique thing to give yourself and to allow yourself, right? So let's go back. So going back from the album Soul by Oak Pantheon, the theme of feeling like you can escape, right? And each of these albums within this playlist I've created, it's like each one kind of speaks to a different feeling you might be feeling that night, right? So if you are feeling, again, you're sad, you're depressed, the feeling of being kind of swallowed into that sadness is kind of what most of us do, right? If you're ever angry at something, it's really hard to just turn off the anger and forgive and just be nice. Even though 90% of the time, that's probably the thing you should do if your anger is misplaced. And what do I mean by that? Well, anger, like, you need to understand it. Anger in the first place is like someone who's only angry if their beliefs or their values have been trampled on purpose, right? If you believe any of those things have been trampled on purpose, you will get angry, right? So if you come home and let's say you have a partner, right? Like let's say you come home, your partner's supposed to do your partner's supposed to do the laundry or something. You go in and you see that the laundry pile still isn't put in there. So you take, and you probably ask them like, hey, could you do the laundry while I'm out at work today? You come home and you see that and you think, this person doesn't respect me. I can't believe they did this. They did this again. They always do this. They always forget to do this. I hate and then you got to stop yourself. You got to take a minute. Okay, well, first of all, one of the best things to counter this is to like ask the other person, hey, just ask neutrally. Don't come off with an attitude. Don't come off with this face. Don't come off with this energy. So like, hey, I noticed the laundry didn't get done. Is everything okay? And then you might find out that like, oh, sorry, I forgot. Here, I'll go do it right now. Or they might say like, oh, well, I actually got some bad news that like my relative just passed away, so I've been thinking too much about that. Or they could be like, oh, well, I was actually planning our weekend vacation next week or something like that. Something that like would allude to the fact that they didn't deliberately try to insult you is basically the point. And understanding that perspective really helps you let go of the anger. But when you're angry, all you want to do is revel in the anger because it's easier. It just feels good to be angry, even though you didn't choose necessarily to be angry. It was your reaction, but you always have the choice of stop being angry, okay? And so to take that reveling in the emotion is the same sensation when we get when we're sad. We just want to keep living in the sadness. It hurts to just break out of that, right? Once we're in the emotion, it's hard to get out. So when you're feeling sad one night, I would highly, and you want to feel escape, like you're saying thoughts of suicide, but you don't actually want to kill yourself. You just want an escape from the world. You want to hit the reset button. You want all the responsibilities that are holding onto your neck right now just to go away. So the idea that the world just ends, the trees are gray, nothing exists, you don't exist, you're okay, it's whatever. Then you're having another night where you want to feel like you're going into on an adventure. Then I would again recommend the soundtrack to ODST, the Halo game. But another album I like to highly mention is this one by another smaller group called White Moth Black Butterfly. That is the name of the group. They've created this album called Atone, and I would recommend the expanded edition. So like the deluxe edition for those who are used to that, who listen to music. Like you got the normal album and then the deluxe album for the super fans and all that stuff. And this is an album that very much it's packed with atmosphere. It's packed with like the mix of singing between a guy and a girl. And it just feels like and the album cover art is of a deer or an elk or a buck of sorts, some type of creature that, a deer that goes through the woods, that kind of creature. And it's overlooking a fogged forest. And it's supposed to be calm, and you're supposed to feel alone and serene, and it's just you and nature. Another theme that is kind of therapeutic, meditative, if you will, that like when you're with nature, like let's say if you go out for a walk and you're walking in nature and you don't have headphones in and you're literally just looking around, taking in the outside, it's a very good thing to do because one, you're moving, it's good for your body, helps you think, body and mind connection type thing. And it's like when you're in nature, no one else is there, you're back in that moment of like somewhat innocence in a way because you're literally around objects that are organic, so in a way alive, but they don't judge you. They're just there, right? You just got some trees, you got grass, you got maybe there's a bridge someone built in the park on the path you're walking along, and it's just like things, right? There's nothing really there to judge you or for you to compare yourself to necessarily in that moment. So as long as you're present on that walk, it's just you and nature, and it's just you being you, no one to judge you, you're free again, right? So the sense this album gives you, Atone, the album by White Moth Black Butterfly, is that you're just in this mystified world and it's a forest and you can imagine you're, I don't know, maybe traveling through the forest like an actual just typical forest with mountains and there's like wildlife walking around and maybe just like the point of your sleep journey in this case is that you're just discovering nature and it wows you and it amazes you and it surprises you. Again, you're falling asleep and slowly turning into a deep state of sleep. So your subconscious directing your journey is completely like enchanting, if you will, right? And sometimes because of the mystifying like colors on the album of like the fog over the forest, I kind of also think of like a fogged over beach, right? Where the ocean is barely covering the beach. It's a very thin one and it's like one of those long beaches where it's just covered in lots of black rocks, but still enough sand so you could comfortably walk, but it's surrounded by those black rocks. And you're kind of almost going on a very thin path, a very thin beach that almost extends to like a little mini island that you sometimes see if you're on if you've been on a beach, you sometimes see those little extensions of the beach that kind of goes out into water into a little circle of a little island of sand, but doesn't really go anywhere. But maybe in your sleep journey, it continues and it goes on and it keeps going, right? So these are all just examples of sleep journeys, things that like can bring out the innocence and the freedom we all deny ourselves or lose from our loss of innocence as we grow older. So the idea of that, you just put on the music and you just let go and you just feel the hum and the vibration of the music take you over as you're falling asleep. Now, I'll admit, not every night is a night where I feel like taking a sleep journey. I am someone who sometimes needs to hear a story. So I'll put on like a book from Audible or something like that, or like a YouTube video where someone's telling a story, something where I don't have to feel that I absolutely need to give it my full attention, but it's nice to listen to, right? It's not something that like I need to study. Like let's say I'm listening to a lecture on Audible of something about I'm learning, whether psychology, economics, or something like that. Where I want to take notes. So it's best not to listen to something but something that's more like, I don't know, maybe like an 18-hour course about the civilization of history. And it's interesting. And the way the teacher talks about it's actually super down to earth, super interesting, very digestible, not talking into like dates and stuff, but it's more about like, oh, these guys were called the Mesopotamians and they did through these years and they actually did this if you didn't know. And this is and this and this. And this is how they died off. And it's interesting to me, at least. So that's why I would listen to something like that. But it's like the point is that to listen to a story is to like put your mind on a railroad track, and you just don't realize it's slowly moving, and it's keeping your mind busy from just treading onto thoughts you just can't control, or like thinking about tomorrow and stuff. So, you know, there's a reason why they tell us stories as kids to fall asleep, right? It distracts you long enough while you're kind of in bed for you to just doze off, right? Again, especially with a story, it kind of paints the picture for you, tells you the literal what you should be imagining type thing. Almost. Some stories will say they went to the kingdom and your brain fills out what the kingdom exactly looks like. But, you know, I digress. Point is that you're being carried away by a train of thought while you're trying to sleep, and you just let go, right? And so with that, there's probably more things I would like to share with all this, but I think that's about it. So yeah, so I guess the point of all of this was that, you know, just understand that like in life, whether it's sadness or happiness or whatever, the lack of innocence we tend to forget, or even like if you're a teenager now and you still have your innocence somewhat, you're, I guess technically in the process of losing it, it's important to understand that it's okay to just be you, you know? And as you're an adult, it gets harder to do that because there's all these expectations from like your parents, your family, your friends that like, oh, you gotta get married, you gotta have kids, you gotta do this, you gotta have this job, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, life is slowly changing around us as to what the norms are. And, you know, things are slowly breaking out of, you know, the 9 to 5, the go to college, university, like everyone's slowly getting away from that. And school seems less and less like a viable decision depending on your career, right? And so there's just way more ways to make money nowadays and to go about your life. And it's just, you know, it's the world is changing, and that's something you can't control. But what you can control is your experience on this earth and on who you are and what your life is. And it really isn't worth it. Like we always constantly forget that we're going to die someday. And, you know, you don't want to look back on your life and be like, I wish I actually did what I wanted. And there's obviously that classic regret in our heads, like, oh yeah, the guy who chased his dream and then like he got it. I wish I could be that guy, but like we're all afraid because the chances are slim or whatever. But sometimes, you know, I mean, technically from what I'm saying, it should be that chasing after your dreams is 1000% worth it. And if you don't, you're somewhat of a fool because you only get one life. So if you're going to spend your life playing it safe for the sake of others, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot. There's always exception to the rule, though. Let's say if you have a family already, you obviously shouldn't compromise that. You've kind of signed up for that. That's another talk for another day of like committing to things in your life, you know, choosing certain paths over others. And some paths you can reverse on and others you can't, in terms of how much they'll damage some people and won't damage others and all that. But that, again, another story for another day. The main train of thought is don't lose yourself in the haze of life. Realize that you're allowed to be yourself and to enjoy life. We all feel all these stupid, crazy emotions, and it's just not worth it to like put yourself in places and be just so influenced by external things that like you really do have the choice to just not be so influenced, at least. You know, if whatever's internal, again, not talking about clinical depression, clinical anxiety, clinical anything, right? That is a story for another day. I have no expertise on, but for the most part, for most people out there, the general human experience is that life is more than a choice than you think and less serious than you think all the time. Like the other day I listened to a video, some guy on YouTube Short, some guy was asking old people like questions about their lives. He asked this old guy, what's it like to be old? And he said like the most real thing ever, because I had a similar experience talking to a guy who just retired at my work a few months ago. And so this guy in the video said, well, there's two things. One, you feel like you played tackle football yesterday and you woke up feeling sore, but you can't really remember that you played tackle football, so you don't know why you're sore. So that's what every day is like when you're old. And two, you'll go into the bathroom, look at yourself in the mirror, and get scared for a second because, whoa, who's this old guy? Because the point of that phrase is that, and what I learned from my friend who retired recently, I asked him, because he was like, I think he was 65 or 60 something. He was like close to 60 at least. I asked him, hey, I know you're like this age and you're retiring, but like, what age do you actually feel like mentally? And so he took some time on it. And the next day he told me that he actually just feels 30. So And that seems to be a theme that I've kind of noticed, that if you watch those videos about old people and blah blah blah, and you know, it's one little side note is that, like, what I've also found with that is, like, to live a long and happy life, the elements that really come out of it is, one, stay connected to a community, like socially, or else you'll die faster because you just won't have that social support or love and blah 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 and interaction. Human connection is the main point. Two, you need a routine. You need to always be moving, type thing. I have Italian grandparents who've just been always tending to their garden every day for their whole lives, going fishing and blah, 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 literally living to their 80s, 90s, been doing the same thing for 40 years, totally all there in the head, nothing wrong with them, honestly. It's just, it's really about the physical routine and not stopping, right? And so, like, especially when you retire, you got to watch out for that. You got to keep moving or else you're going to lose your brain and body, basically. And so, yeah, so the human connection, constantly moving, all that stuff. And the third thing is that the only thing they really regret, I mean, yes, sometimes they would mention about, like, oh, I wish I did this in life and blah, blah, blah. But the one thing that really pained them every time I looked up these videos was the loss of their partner was the greatest pain they ever felt. And it was the most important thing to them worth mentioning, because usually there would be guys who were married, or even the girls married, right? They would just be left in the house alone. And it's really sad to think about, but yeah, their partner is gone, a person they invested at least 50 years of their life into, and they're just gone. Like their other half, basically. When you spend that much time with someone you truly love, you're basically cutting your soul in half, and it's just gone. And it's just like, you just gotta exist now, right? You're almost in a limbo state. Now, all those who are still around you, alive and well, are just like, want you to keep living your life. But it's like, what is your life anymore? It's like everything you knew and thought you knew is almost upside down, right? It's like, what do you do? And that is, I don't know. I see people in my life deal with that now, and all I could see is that the only thing that stayed true to that in terms of advice is that it's not easy, but it gets easier, type thing. You know, you'll never be the same, but it'll get somewhere. And with that, I want to thank you for listening. And if you'd like, I'll put a link in my video description to the Sleep Journeys playlist. So please check it out if you're interested. I highly recommend just going into the playlist, starting on one of the albums, listening to it in sequence, and then going from there. And with that, yeah. And if you have any ideas or suggestions for future videos, please leave in the comments. I love reading your stories. Honestly, the best part of these videos is honestly just hearing your guys' stories, honestly, and seeing what effect or relatability this has, and then hearing how it inspired you to share your story in my comments. I've had that in the last 2-3 videos now where people have just shared just great stories. I just love hearing people's stories because this is the reality, right? I share my experience. Now I want you to share yours, and other people will see we're all not alone in whatever feelings I've elaborated on, right? And we're not, and it's more common than we think. And again, it's all about the human connection, right? It's really it. I kind of like, half the reason why people usually comment is to just share their experience because they're being vulnerable and there's another human they're experiencing it with and blah, blah, blah. I don't know. I think I'm getting too philosophical on my comments, but point is, link in description for everything related I mentioned in this video today. And please let me know what you want to hear me talk about next. I love themes about music, you know, psychology, philosophy, blah, 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 all that crap, but like mostly like music, games and stuff. I don't know. If you think I got something worth talking about, feel free to share that in comments. Or whatever. I'll keep talking about whatever I want to talk about, but I thought I'd share that with you guys. So, I don't know. And also leave me a like. So, I'm asking so many things. I'm sorry. I'm so bad about call to actions at the end of my videos. But if you also leave me a like, just so I know this video was actually good and useful to you. It's so many people click on these videos, they don't subscribe and they don't like, so I have no idea if it was good or they just bounced off because it wasn't for them. But anyways, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.